Yipee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon.
Welcome back to Yipee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon, you Mr. Falconing sons of birds. Hi. This is a cool one. This is our deep dive into the Hannibal Lecter film series. TJ and I got talking about these movies. As you'll hear, he hadn't seen one of them, but he had seen all the rest, and he watched the remainder for his homework. And we're going to hear what he thought about it. And we come to some interesting conclusions by the end after going through it movie by movie. And it turns out that there's really only one, maybe if you stretch it, two movies in the entire film series that are worth a shit. And the last three are kind of fluff and suspiciously like a cash grab, man. After the momentous film that is Silence of the Lambs, this is just further proof, and we keep running into this over and over again, episode after episode, but it's further proof that when you have an incredible film that becomes a cultural touchstone and begins to live in the collective consciousness of the pop culture mind, you can't really make a sequel to it and have it be good. I mean, you can try, you can extend the story, you can tell another chapter, but when we talk about successful sequels, we talk about things like Godfather 2, a true sequel that's the spirit of the original, just as good as the original, just more story. And there's a lot of reasons that worked, and there's a lot of reasons that these movies don't really work. And even though each one is an adaptation of a novel written by the author who created the character of Hannibal Lecter and wrote Silence of the Lambs, it doesn't save these stories from their poor translation to film. That's where we ended up anyway. So join us as we run through the films in the order that they were released. So we're going to start with 1986, going all the way back to 86 with Michael Mann's Manhunter, which was an adaptation of the Red Dragon novel by Thomas Harris. That was followed by Silence of the Lambs, of course, in 1991, adaptation of the novel by the same name, which was the second book to feature Dr. Hannibal Lecter, everyone's favorite cannibal serial killer psychiatrist. It's fucking sick, and we love it. Silence of the Lambs was followed by Hannibal, and then by Red Dragon, another adaptation of that novel, and then Hannibal Rising, a adaptation of a prequel novel written by Harris that tells Hannibal Lecter's origin story like he's a Marvel character. But we'll get to that. And we'll get to a little bit about the television series entitled Hannibal, which is a different animal altogether. We got going. It's a lot of movies. It's a lot of stuff to cover. So this is going to be a two-parter. This is part one of our deep dive into the Hannibal Lecter movie series. Look for part two. Should download at the exact same time. We're dropping them on the same day, so you have both. And we hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane with us, one of the more memorable thriller series and arguably horror series of the 1990s, even though it's a really disjointed one with a lot of bad entries. It's still one of the most memorable characters in cinema history and one that will live on for a long, long time. So here is the first part of our deep dive into the Hannibal Lecter movies. Welcome back, Mr. Falconers. Tuck your sack back and get ready to wear someone else's bloody face like a mask. talking about Hannibal Lecter movies today. And Hannibal Lecter movies are something that our generation just grew up with, man. It's so fucked up. But it's true. Hannibal Lecter became a pop culture icon when we were, like 10, 11 years old?
Yeah. I mean, around about there.
You had Billy Crystal getting wheeled out during the Academy Awards in full Hannibal Lecter gear, dressed up like a fictional serial killer. So that's what was going on when we were like 10. Everyone was into serial killing.
Yeah, it was a thing.
They still kind of are. They just switched from fictional serial killers to true crime.
Yeah.
And real ones, because there's a lot of them.
There's too many.
And they got a lot of stories. You can get totally obsessed with that and never, ever, ever run out of stuff. But we're talking about a fake one, so everything's okay. We don't have to worry about capitalizing on any real dead people.
No victims were harmed in the making of this review of these movies.
No, there were some bad movies that were made, though.
We were the victims.
Yes, more than once, but it kind of balances out because the good ones are really, really good. So, Hannibal Lecter, in case anyone doesn't know, primarily when people talk about Hannibal Lecter, they talk about his portrayal by Anthony Hopkins in the Academy Award-winning Silence of the Lambs from 1991. So we were not yet 10 years old. Pretty much he's been around since we can remember. But it's kind of hard to explain how big this movie was. And the fact that it came out in 91 when we were like 8 and we remember it. Like, I remember it being, commercials being on TV and him being on talk shows, both of them, him and Jodie Foster being on talk shows. I remember my dad renting this movie and loving it, though I wasn't allowed to watch it. But I remember he was like psyched about it. He really loved this movie. It was one of those great 90s thrillers just by itself. But then it unexpectedly, many years later, turned into an odd quasi
franchise
series of films. Yeah, I mean, do you call it a franchise?
Sure.
It's not. I guess so. I mean, each one is made is an adaptation of a novel by Thomas Harris, and that's a series of novels, a sequential series of novels. So yeah, sure, why not, right? But it's a weird franchise that was made kind of out of order in a really disjointed way. And one of the movies was made twice. One of the books was adapted twice. So we're going to talk about what the series is for people who may not know or just kind of know Hannibal Lecter as as a pop culture figure, as a name, and maybe haven't seen. Well, I mean, I'm sorry for you if you haven't seen Silence of the Lambs, but I can forgive you for not seeing pretty much all the others. But yeah, we'll get into why these movies came out, when and how they did. And it's kind of it's interesting to take that and put it right next to the Hannibal series, which is a whole nother animal that uses the same source material. We'll get into that. It's really neat to see what writers can do when they have when they have a complete story in front of them, instead of just bits and pieces. And I'm sure the writers of the Star Wars movies can attest to that.
Ooh. Don't go there.
Sick burn, I know. Calling out the fucking mouse right at the beginning here. All right, so TJ had some homework for this assignment. It wasn't much. He had seen all of the Hannibal Lecter movies except the very first one that a lot of people don't even know about, called Manhunter, right? Like, that was the only one you hadn't seen?
Yeah, that was the only one I hadn't seen. And
okay.
Yeah, and so that was cool to get to see something that's totally disconnected from all the other ones. It was the one that came first, and I knew that it was not like part of that whole. What are we going to call it? Like the LCU, the Lecter Cinematic Universe. It was.
Sure.
It functions as a one-off. So yeah, I mean, it was cool.
Now, it came out in 1986, Manhunter.
Ooh.
And it was adapted from Thomas Harris's first novel to feature Hannibal Lecter as a character, which was called Red Dragon. The book was a big success, so they made a movie from it real quick. Word is they changed the title because, it was Cold War America.
Oh, that's why.
Thinking it was, yeah, I think they didn't want people thinking it was a spy thriller or something and getting turned off. Or getting disappointed when they went and saw it. And they changed the name, and they also kind of downplayed the whole William Blake, what do you call those? It's not an illustration. It's a illuminated manuscript or whatever. The drawing he did, that's such a big part of the story in the book and in the second adaptation. That's not barely even mentioned in Manhunter, I don't think.
No,
yeah.
they don't. They don't even touch on it.
Yeah, I think it just helped him keep the story tight. The really cool thing about Manhunter, aside from the fact that you have William Peterson from CSI fame, that's how most people know him from the original CSI. He's playing Will Graham, a character we'll get back to in a bit. And you have Brian Cox playing Hannibal Lecter in his very first on-screen ever appearance. And so you'd seen the later Red Dragon film before. What did you think of Manhunter just overall?
Well, I liked it. It was cool, especially since it's strikes a way different tone than what you're used to seeing. Like Silence of the Lambs came out. Hannibal Lecter is like incredible. This amazing character that just jumps off the screen, and then they tried to make the other movies, and they realized they had something with Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal, and they really leaned into him in Red Dragon. He was like a main character, and then you get to go see Manhunter, like with being inundated with Hannibal Lecter after Silence of the Lambs, and he's barely in it with Brian Cox, and it totally changes. It's the tone of the movie. It's not a Hannibal Lecter movie. It's a movie about this guy named Will Graham, which is kind of weird to know that going in, because you're used to Hannibal Lecter being front and center, ever since he was in Silence of the Lambs. So yeah, it was interesting, and like it totally changes what they focus on and what kind of movie you're watching. But to compare it to Red Dragon, yeah, totally. It created, if nothing else, it's got a mood. It's definitely got atmosphere, and like Red Dragon it's none of that.
It should be mentioned that Manhunter has it had Michael Mann, a young Michael Mann at the helm. So this fact that it has a style and a look and a pretty wild soundtrack for the day, of some really underground shit, like techno underground, some half-ass like sort of quasi-goth synth pop stuff. It's a time capsule, but it's also it's stylistic. It's really striking, like there's a lot to look at when you watch that movie. There's a lot of colors. There's a lot of, very deliberate palettes that he chose for different parts of the film. And I think William Peterson did a good job. I liked him as Will Graham.
Yeah, he's good.
What's the guy's name? I always forget, dude. The actor who played the scumbag reporter
in which
Manhunter.
Movie? That was
Manhunter.
Stephen Lang.
Right. Remember I blew your mind and I told you it was the dude from Avatar?
Well, yeah.
And you're like, who, Stephen Lang? I'm like, yeah.
I knew who Stephen Lang was going into this. And I was like, where's Stephen Lang? I mean, I don't see him. And then I found out he was the reporter, and like my head spun around. I was like, wait, that's him?
Yeah.
Time has been very kind to that man. He was
Ike Clanton in Tombstone. too.
Yeah, I mean that was another one. I'm like, that's him. And then like, cause I'd seen him in what's that that ridiculous horror movie where he's muscly and blind. Don't Breathe.
Oh yeah. I saw that too, and they made a sequel. Yeah, he was all right in that. He was pretty good. I think he had a difficult bout with alcoholism and drug abuse, and he came out on the good end of it. He did the Downey Jr. thing,
not the
and
Mickey
then
Rourke
started
thing.
getting right. Well, yeah, he also didn't get his face stapled to the back of his head. But he ended up getting a career revival. I think it was with Avatar. I think that was like his first role, and he was all shredded and ripped and shit. You know, I'm assuming that was part of his recovery. But yeah, it's cool to see actors in two phases of their career like that. So yeah, we're talking about Manhunter here and the time capsule that it is. I mean, the clothes too. That's crazy.
Oh, the clothes.
Yeah. But it's interesting that, and Tom Noonan is the Tooth Fairy / Red Dragon, the main antagonist serial killer for the film, who actually never kills anyone during the story. All of his crimes happen before we come into the story. Yeah, I mean it's the same with Red Dragon. That's how the book is. He's killed 2 families right at the start of this. That's his MO,
and he's eyeing a third.
Yeah, and there's there's something really integral to the plot that kind of requires it to be set in the 80s, in that he targets the families because he works at a company that transfers. I think in the original it was that it transferred like I guess 8mm
35mm
videotape. Was it 35mm? People shot home video in 35mm.
Yeah, that's what they said in the movie. They transferred 35mm to home to VHS.
I don't know shit about that because I mean when we were kids they had video cameras. You know, by then my dad had he had a suitcase of a camcorder that you had to rest on your shoulder when you shot, like a real camera, and it took a full VHS tape. It wasn't some little tiny, like, you could put a whole goddamn tape in there, and it had a light that would blind your ass.
Yeah, it was a shoulder-mounted VCR.
My God, yeah, you could hook it up to a TV with wires and use it as a VCR. Was your dad one of those dads, camcorder dad, when they were cool?
No, my dad was an old school like just photographer. He was always just taking pictures, getting them developed. We didn't have the video cameras going. We had one, we never used it.
Like when I came in at the tail end of my dad's like technology obsession. Somewhere in his 30s, he got really into, I guess when he first started making some money before I came along and took it all, just drained the life out of him and his bank account. But he had bought like a cool stereo shit. You know, we had a reel-to-reel in the house and a Marantz receiver.
Oh, that's cool.
And and like a dual tape deck. And it was all, not a stereo. It wasn't like part of it. You just bought components and hooked them up, and a phonograph, of course, was in there. And then he kind of stopped. Like we got to a point, I really think it was when I was born. Like he got a VCR, he got the camcorder, which I guess he justified because, he had to take videos of the fucking kid, right? And then it kind of just petered out. And then, I don't know. I don't know what, I think I was maybe 11 when we finally got a CD player in the house. Do you remember? Do you remember your family's first CD player?
Yeah, I remember. We had like, I think it was made by Techniques. I think it was, and it had like each different component hooked up to like the head unit. Yeah, the dual tape deck and the CD player and the record player, and then there was like a radio tuner. Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Neat. Yeah, we had bought a big, but it was portable technically, but it was a big boom box with a Sony boombox with a a pop-up CD player on the top and a dual tape deck. And man, that was the CD player for a long time. I made a lot of tapes on that thing. That was cool. It was good times. Anyway,
spent hours doing that.
Speaking of CDs, I actually, when I rewatched Manhunter recently, I wanted to know what the hell that song was that they play. The Tooth Fairy's song. They play almost the whole fucking song
Towards the end of the movie,
in
right?
the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's by a band called Shriekbach.
Shriekbach.
Shriekback. Yeah, I don't know how the fuck you say it, but that's how it's spelled, Shriekbach. And I go on Spotify, I find the record that it's on. They have the album that it's from, but that and 2 other songs are grayed out. You can't play them. And I got pissed, and I went and bought a goddamn CD on Amazon. I think Amazon. CD. I might have had to go. Yeah, I might have had to go to eBay. I do that all the time, dude. If I find something that even is a little difficult to find on a streaming service, I go buy it physically if I can, because it freaks me out. I feel like it's not going to be available, or it may never be available. Because I mean, if it isn't on one of these major streaming services at this point, and you can't even buy it on Amazon Prime or iTunes or whatever passes for iTunes these days, whatever they call it, the Apple Store or whatever the fuck it is. I mean, where is it going to be?
Yeah.
Where the hell do you get it? I mean, of course, everyone's like, fucking torrents, fucking down. I understand that. But I don't, as even as tech savvy as the population is today, most people aren't doing that.
No, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I used to. There was a time. I have no clue how I would do that and not ruin my computer or get arrested doing it too much. I have no clue how I would even get started, and I don't even want to Google it. So, yeah, Googling, that's where I'd be starting. That's not a good sign. So, yeah, it's just not an option for a lot of people, and it kind of freaks me out that good art, good movies, good TV shows could get lost for who knows how long.
Down the memory hole.
And streaming services used to do the opposite. They used to comfort me, because I'd go on Hulu and I'd find some show from the 80s that I barely remembered, and they had every season and every episode on there. I'd be like, oh, cool, man. This is that's awesome. It's there forever, That was before I realized that, that this is the early days of Hulu and streaming. I didn't realize that they would just indiscriminately delete shit when they ran out of licensing agreement. I didn't even stop to think how it worked. I just wanted to watch old TV shows. Was there anything that turned you off about Mindhunter, seeing it with fresh eyes? Yeah. Manhunter. Now, did I say Mindhunter?
Yeah, you sure did.
I got fucking serial killers on the brain, man. It was a great show.
It was.
You should check it out.
It was awesome.
Oh, and not to date this podcast, but I just watched the first episode of the new season of True Detective, and that also seems really awesome. And I only bring it up because Jodie Foster is starring in it, and
I watched it too.
She's kind of. Did you? What'd you think?
It was pretty good. I liked it.
Are you a big fan of the first season?
The first season is no less than one of the best seasons of television I've ever seen. It's incredible. Followed by,
I knew there was a reason I hang out with you.
Yeah, man, I'm on it. I'm with you.
Keep going.
Followed
keep going.
By
what was
the
that?
worst season of TV I've ever seen. Oh, season 2 is so bad.
You are my brother from another mother, because Jesus Christ, man. Yeah, I can't. I've tried maybe 4 times to watch that fucking season, and I still have not made it through. I can't.
It's
I
awful.
get to the 3rd episode, and I'm just out of gas, man. I don't know what's going on. I don't care. It's so
because
boring.
They killed the only interesting character on that whole show. Never mind. It's just we won't go there. To answer your question, Manhunter, I liked it. There were some things that I don't know, man. it seemed like Michael Mann couldn't decide whether or not he wanted to do a musical score or
Sorry.
or a soundtrack, because like most of the movie is like that high pitched like quavering synth background, which is like, okay, I get this. This is like an 80s vibe, and then like 3/4 of the way through the movie, you get like that song you're talking about, and it's just like it's like this weird half spoken like in the night, and he's got all these dark lyrics, and they play like it's like it turns into a music video, and then you just get more and more songs, and it's like did the composer quit and they just had to fill up the rest of it with music? That was a little strange, but it created like a vibe, a mood. It was dark, which I thought was cool.
It was
in a way.
I mean, literally, it was literally dark. You mean, right?
Yeah. And
the look of the movie,
the look of the movie was dark, and you had a lot of things going in stark contrast to Red Dragon, including Will Graham. Like William Peterson, I mean, he was pretty good, but he played it like this world-weary guy who's seen some shit, and he's been damaged by it, and they gotta convince him to come back. Like he gets mad. He's like, you can't bring me back into this, but like he knows he's got to do it. And then you see,
he's not okay. He's not mentally well.
He is messed up. And then you get Ed Norton, who's just plays it like a scout leader. He's like, there are people that need my help. I have to help them.
Yeah,
and just everything he says comes off like matter of fact. It's just like, oh my God, I thought Dr. Lecter, I thought I had the guy. Oh, gee Willikers. It just, I couldn't stand. I think William Peterson's was better. That being said, there were a couple parts where he's just like staring at his own reflection. He's like, "You touched her, you son of a bitch! I'm gonna get you. It's you and me, buddy boy." He's just like psyching himself
it's
up.
So bad. The dialogue is so bad.
I imagine it is that way because it had to have been written that way in the book because they both do it.
Yeah, it's the same lines.
You touched her, you son of a bitch.
That you had to take off your glove and you had to touch her, didn't you? Yeah, the whole when he's trying. Yeah, he's in the mind of the serial killer. We'll get to that more later. But Ed Norton, I think he's talking into a tape recorder instead of to his own reflection, which makes it
they're both talking into a tape recorder. They're both doing it.
Okay.
At points.
It's been a while since I've seen Manhunter. But I just remember it being real cringy when Peterson does that bit of dialogue. It's real bad.
It is.
It's real bad. And Ed Norton's is not much better. And I like Ed Norton. Like I've liked Ed Norton in things, and I've also really not liked him in some things. And I don't want to say he phoned this in or anything, but I think a lot of roles in that movie, like not to get ahead of ourselves, but I think a lot of roles in Red Dragon were miscast badly. I hate Harvey Keitel as Jack Crawford. I'm not like super psyched about Dennis Farina from the original, but considering there was no template or example yet for Jack Crawford, it's fine. But then you've got Scott Glenn from Lambs.
Scott Glenn got it.
Yeah, and then he turns into Harvey Keitel 6 years earlier or whatever.
6 inches shorter.
If you're gonna go through the bullshit, I mean, again, we're ahead of ourselves, but if you're gonna go through all the bullshit of having Anthony Hopkins add some kind of string of continuity to these films by playing Lecter in all of them, couldn't you was Scott Glenn busy? I've seen the shit he's been doing. I don't think he was busy. I think if you had paid him enough, he would have come back to do Jack Crawford, and he would have done really fucking amazing because he's awesome. And instead, we got Harvey Keitel playing the only role he can play, Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
Except in Bad Lieutenant, which was he was really cool in that.
I didn't see that.
He was good in Mean Streets. Of course, he was good in Mean Streets, but whatever. We can talk about that later.
And
I mean, they even got the same fuckhead to play Chilton, to come back and play Chilton in Red Dragon.
He's a real creep.
Yeah. No, that's that face, man. That face. That
That
fucking face.
that Jonathan Demme pulls into that real tight shot in Silence of the Lambs when he's like he's hitting
Yeah.
on Jodie Foster. Baltimore can be quite a fun town. And they're just
You have the right guide.
if you have the right guide, and it's just his whole mouth is moving with their. Oh, he's so creepy.
Yeah, I mean the goal of that scene is so that you feel you feel Clarice's revulsion, and it fucking works, man.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so gross. Yeah, and you can hear like his mouth sounds when he talks.
It's like you're
that had to
inside
be
it.
on purpose. Yeah, it's all wet. It's all wet. But like, that brings something up naturally is that Silence of the Lambs followed, but it didn't come out until 1991. So 1986 for Manhunter, 1991 for Silence.
5
Why?
years.
Why the giant break? I mean, Manhunter was actually pretty successful at the box office. You know, Michael Mann was an up-and-coming director. Brian Cox lent some validity to it because he was an established actor and he was in it. And he got, top billing and shit. And then he was, obviously well-known in England, so it did well overseas. It was a success. People were into serial killer movies at the time, and there weren't that many of them. So why didn't they make a sequel right away? Well, there was no book. Thomas Harris hadn't written any more material. He had only written Manhunter.
It was a Game of Thrones
And,
situation.
Yeah, there was no chicken. So, and Silence of the Lambs wasn't published until 88. It first came out. So it took a couple years to, I guess, get it all sorted again. And a different studio made it than Manhunter. So its rights were owned independently of the rest of the storyline. But Will Graham isn't in the book regardless. He survives. He survives the story in Red Dragon.
Yeah.
But he's not. He's mentioned very briefly in the book, Silence of the Lambs, and not at all in the film. And Jack Crawford and Hannibal are the only two characters that carry over at all to Silence of the Lambs. And that movie, I mean, I just watched it again for like the 100th time.
Silence of the Lambs?
Ago, and yeah. And
It's incredible.
I don't know, man. Yeah, as soon as you see the first frame, you know what movie it is. Like, it has such a distinct tone.
It's gritty.
And atmosphere. Yeah, man, but it's not. I don't know. If I was a cinematographer, maybe I could put my finger on it better. But it's desaturated, but not too desaturated. It almost looks real. If that sounds like the blacks are super black, nothing is too bright. Like the color palette's very dark and very autumn. Very very autumn and wet. In the Northeast.
Yeah, I get that.
Every day is a dreary day in that movie until you see sunshine at the end, which makes it seem kind of really. It's really distinct and stands out. But I don't know, man. A movie it feels like the X-Files to me. It's got that damp British Columbia, we filmed this in Vancouver kind of feel, even though I don't think they did. But man, I just love that movie. I love it. I can watch it.
That movie was
all the
filmed
time.
on location, I think, in Quantico. They actually had access
in
to
Virginia.
The FBI headquarters.
Yeah, I guess it had to have been. Nothing else really kind of looks like that. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't shift with the location. I don't know I don't know how that was approached. I wonder if they decided how they wanted the prison cell scenes to look and then went from there. Because think about that cell that they hold him in, that they hold Hannibal in when they're transferring him. In the middle of that giant room, like what a set, what an environment to come up with. And it's so weird if you really think about it, but when you just see it, it's so cool.
His
It's
cell?
such an interesting, yeah. That prison cell just standing in the middle of that giant room.
Yeah, it is a lot of space.
It's kind of, but you kind of get it because it lets them control what gets near them. But it's weird that they didn't have an actual jail to just hold him in. I don't think they ever really quite explained why they couldn't just take him to a local jail.
No, but it works, though.
It would have been a lot more secure, I think, than what they ended up with. But hey, that sequence, his escape, it's so fucking cool, man. I remember the first time I saw that escape, the ambulance scene, when he takes the guy's face off.
Yeah, it was like mind blowing.
You didn't know. You had no friggin' idea the misdirection in that, and they do it to you twice.
Well, when she's ringing the doorbell.
Yeah, and so many movies have copied that. So many other things have copied that whole setup, where you think one character is talking to the other one, and you think they're in the same place, and then they're not. They're headed to the same place, and Lambs, like, how the hell do you trick the audience once so hard like that with the escape, and then minutes later totally lull them into this new trap, and fuck, it sets up one of the best endings. And not only that, but the movie ends twice, and both endings are awesome.
What do you mean it ends twice?
Well, like, you could, I mean, when she shoots Buffalo Bill in the basement, and you got the sun streaming in, and there's all those great shots of the moths and that butterfly, spinny thing. Like, that's kind of an end. That could have been a good ending. Like, you could have pulled out, on that house and all the commotion out front, and that could have been the end. But then you've got the great call from Hannibal Lecter at the actual end.
The denouement.
And the implied end of Dr. Chilton, too. Which you don't see, but you're pretty sure of, and confirmed in later movies, that he does not make it.
Oh, he's toast.
His encounter. I could never tell where they are in that ending. Is it like Jamaica or Haiti?
I think it might be
somewhere
Haiti
tropical,
because it's. I feel like I'm hearing French. Like the guy has the guy he's with sounds like he's got a real heavy French accent. So it could be. It's probably. I thought it was Haiti.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it looks like Haiti, too. It's such a good ending. It's such a good ending. If anyone doesn't remember...
Oh, the double speak.
Yeah. he calls Clarice up at her, I guess, FBI graduation when she gets her status as an FBI agent. She's graduated from Quantico. And I guess he pretended to be someone else on the phone, gets her on the horn. And he had escaped. He had been on the lam for a while at this point, and you can tell he's somewhere exotic, and he's wearing like a white linen suit and a white fedora and sunglasses. I think he has like a blonde wig on, and so he's on the run, and he's somewhere weird and far away, and he just kind of gives her like this little wry congratulations and everything, and then he says he's having an old friend for dinner. And then you see Dr. Chilton like getting off a bus. You getting off this bus? Like,
I think he's getting off a plane. He's getting off an airplane.
Is it a plane? He's right off a plane, and he's all nervous, and he's asking the guy, like whoever his guide is, all these questions about security and where he's clearly on the run, and Hannibal's just there waiting for him already.
And then
he
Dr.
walks
Lecter.
off.
Dr. Lecter.
Dr. Lecter.
Dr. Lecter.
Dr. Lecter. And then Hannibal just walks off into the crowd.
That's the whole credits crawl street, too.
And then the credits roll, and it's fucking excellent. It's so easy to have bad endings on these movies, or cookie cutter endings on a movie like any serial killer movie, And we've seen so many imitations since. And to see just that's just, it's so good. The pacing is perfect. The movie is perfect. The story, if you ever read Silence of the Lambs, I defy you to tell me that the movie isn't better than the book. because
See, I haven't read the book.
Yeah, I read. Oh God, I read Hannibal before I saw the movie because the book came out first, of course. And my dad, like I said, was a big Lambs fan, and he bought the book as soon as it came out. Read it. I read it. Movie came out. It was pretty much, other than the ending, which was controversial, and a couple other things, it was pretty much note for note the same story. Because obviously it was done in tandem with the production company, of course. But I went to go read Silence of the Lambs later, and I was expecting all kinds of extra shit, more shit, because it's a novel, and that was an 1.5-hour movie. So I was expecting more of the story, maybe more dialogue between Clarice and Hannibal. There is more, but it's awful. And it's one of the it's one of the rare cases that the movie is just a lot better than the book. It just is. Like, all the good parts are in the movie, and they're not in the fucking book. Even if you read the script, yeah, I've read through the script for Silence of the Lambs, and there's little bits of dialogue that they chopped out, just him and Clarice talking, that were pulled. Some of it was pulled from the book, and they didn't do it. Like, either they didn't film it or it got cut. And there's just some stinkers in there, man. There's just some really weird, tonally weird lines. And Thomas Harris is a weird writer. Like, he's really good. He's really good at coming up with extremely fucked up scenarios. And he's really good at coming up with fucked up characters with really dark, macabre motivations. But putting like
dialogue,
his dialogue's bad, and he has a real hard time writing relatable characters. Will Graham is really his most relatable character, and it's like he shot his load with that in the first movie. And then, Clarice is a great character, but she's not as much. There's not as much of her on the page as there is in the film. And she just kind of, I always felt like she was kind of a standard hero in the book. You could give her a different name and she could be anybody almost. Yeah, any young buck cadet. And in the movie, she's a very distinct human being and a very fleshed out character, even though you don't spend that much time with her.
I feel like that's what makes it.
I was disappointed.
It makes it that I think that's one of the things that makes it a better movie than everything else, is because you look at Will Graham in both Red Dragon and Manhunter, and he kind of ends the movie right where we began. When you first meet him, he's like this world-weary, seasoned profiler that catches the bad guys, and he's tortured by it, but he gets his man, and that's how he ends the movie. And he's got some more scratches and wounds along the way, but he doesn't change at all. He figures it out, and he's still the same. But Clarice, oh man, you get to watch her go from like a starry-eyed, naive cadet, and her arc is huge. She goes through so much shit and enters a bunch of situations that you get as the viewer. You're like, she ain't prepared for this, but she does it anyway, and you get her arc is amazing, and it's like totally different from what you get with Will Graham. He's just
she always rises to the occasion in a very realistic way, and she's in school, like she hasn't done shit yet. She's got a temporary ID as an FBI agent,
which he notices
zero experience. Yeah, and that makes her super relatable. And obviously it's the same setup in the book, but there's just less color to her in the book. And I don't know, I'm sure it was a combination of everything, but Jodie Foster was incredible in that role.
Oh, she was great.
And really, just brought her to life with just not that much screen time to work with. And speaking of that, I think Lecter himself was only in like 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, it's possibly the most efficient performance of all time. He got an Oscar out of 15 minutes of screen time.
Yeah. And arguably a whole new career. Like, he'd been an actor for a very long time. Obviously, he's not a young man in Silence of the Lambs. And he had some really bad substance abuse problems, and his career got like sidelined a couple times. And then he did this weird serial killer movie, you know, and just ate it up, man. He just literally ate it up. He just chewed that. You could almost argue he overacted, but man, it plays. It still plays.
It was great. I loved it.
Yeah, that first conversation between the two of them in his prison, outside his prison cell at the asylum is just epic. It's epic.
Right on down to when she like rounds the corner after seeing all these like scary people, and he's just standing there all prim and proper, just ready to receive like a guest. It's so creepy, but it works so well.
Man, and the other thing too, Harris really describes Lecter very differently. He does have slicked back hair in the books, but he actually has purple eyes.
Purple?
Yeah, it's some weird, rare genetic thing. So he has purple eyes that sometimes appear red in different types of light, if I recall. And his teeth are like almost pointy.
Oh, I'm glad they didn't do that.
Yeah, and he's, a similar stature, I guess, to how Hopkins is, in that, he's not very big, but he's supposed to be like lithe and with a dancer's grace or some shit, Harris really he just overindulges in his villains. He loves that shit. Like Mason Verger in Hannibal. Ugh, just ad nauseum. The movie's better just because it's shorter. But so then there we go. 1991, Silence of the Lambs, huge hit, Academy Award for Hopkins. We got Jodie Foster. Was she nominated? She was nominated, right?
I don't remember.
She won?
I don't. I know that it was one of those. It cleaned house at the Oscars. I think it got like best adapted screenplay. I think it was best picture. I'd have to look it up.
Fortunately, we have the internet. Google pause. Okay, so Silence of the Lambs won Academy Awards for Best Actor, Best Actress for Jodie Foster, Best Picture, Best Director for Demi, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Sound Mixing and Best Film Editing. It's a big fucking year for Lambs.
Crushed
that was
it.
the year that was the year Crystal came out in the Hannibal Lecter mask strapped to a hand truck. And because I guess I had been nominated for everything under the fucking sun. I guess they knew it was going to go home with quite a few. So huge hit. It's this cultural phenomenon. All of a sudden, references to the movie, to Hannibal Lecter, to all of it start popping up everywhere in other movies.
Everybody was doing this. They're going.
Yeah, that scene. Jesus Christ, it was the meme before memes. People just fucking did it in real life. Jim Carrey did it like a Hannibal Lecter thing in The Cable Guy with the chicken skin on his face at medieval times. Yeah. And, I thought it was funny. I love that fucking movie, but that's a different conversation. So, yeah, it's huge hit. And then nothing. There's no follow-up. And, that didn't seem that weird at the time, because most people didn't know Manhunter existed, and unless you read the books, you didn't know that there was a previous story at all. And there were also no more books. Even between 88 and 91, Harris still hadn't written another book. I don't know if this dude just is like an artist. I don't know if he's allergic to making money, but fucking, I don't know. Most writers would have just been cranking Hannibal Lecter stories out, man. Like Ian fucking Fleming.
Yeah, like one a year.
Yeah, but he took his sweet time. And, 3 years went by, Lambs gets made, and there's no more books. So nothing is available to adapt until 1999. A full 8 years after Silence of the Lambs came out. Harris published Hannibal, a sequel, a direct sequel to Silence of the Lambs, a continuation of what happens to Clarice and Hannibal. I guess it's set 10 years later. Yeah, it's about that. Yeah, Hannibal's been on the run for almost a decade and still hasn't been caught. So, as you can imagine, things change in that amount of time. And Jodie Foster, I don't think from what I remember reading, she wasn't interested in doing a franchise of any kind. She wasn't interested in playing that character anymore because, that was kind of the character that put her as an adult on the map. She'd been a child star and since Taxi Driver and everything and inspired a presidential assassination attempt.
Oh, yeah.
But, this was her first, this was like the first adult role she had that was massive, and obviously
huge.
she won an Oscar for it, So it was a big deal. So I can understand that. It's weird to go back to your Oscar-winning role 9 years later for a sequel. Like, that could go really bad, right? So she didn't sign up. And also, there was word that she didn't like what Harris had done with the character. And we'll get to that in a second. So they recast Clarice Starling.
Ew.
Now, that's a huge fucking red flag. And even back when this movie came out, it was a red flag. And I knew it. And it came out in 2001. And I knew, Christ, what was I? A senior in high school at the time. And I knew that this was going to suck. Like, on some level, it was going to suck. I didn't know what level, but... And I read the book. And the ending is fucking strange. After eating a dude's brains, together, on a lot of drugs... Clarice and Hannibal just abscond together in a quasi love affair.
Wait, she runs away with him?
Yeah. Her and Hannibal run away at the end of the book together,
boy.
and she eats part of old Paul's brain, in the book, and they fuck off together,
Like on purpose.
And I think it ends with her on a plane with him.
Oh boy.
I'm pretty sure that's how it ends, is right on the plane. And people, that's why people freaked out. Like, there was a lot of weirdness when that book first came out, because Clarice Starling, after Lambs came out, became a very big feminist. Do you say feminist icon when it's a fictional character? But it was, she became a beacon
like
for
a symbol.
feminism. Yeah, she was such a very realistic, strong woman in a traditionally male role, hunting down serial killers as an FBI agent and shooting dudes. She was a badass, and she's a great example of a really well-written character that just happens to be a woman, which is really, hard to come by these days. And having her do that, and I don't know, man. It's like some weird vampire shit. Hannibal just basically seduces her. Like, he's in the books, he's got this kind of almost like a mind controlled Svengali kind of thing that he can do if he talks to you long enough. Like, he can talk people into almost anything.
Like when he makes Miggs, he talks Miggs to death in Silence of the Lambs.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And in theory, that's cool, and the way it was done in Lambs is cool, but when someone like Harris just tries to write it, it comes off not cool because you have to show it. He has to show it. He has to show this whole dance and seduction and everything. And me, like most other readers, read it and were like, yeah, I don't think that would be enough for Clarice to give up her entire life of law enforcement and go eat people with this old man. And yeah, a lot of people felt that way. So that's why they changed the ending for the movie.
Well, yeah, that I remember. I mean, she tries to apprehend him, and I think he winds up getting away. He has to like cut his thumb off or something.
Yeah, they don't make it very clear whether he cuts his whole hand off or not. But
he feeds said brains to a child on an airplane.
That's the only thing that makes me okay with it, because that's such a wonderful ending. He fed that little bastard.
It's like a little girl.
Man brains. Yeah.
Oh, God.
This little kid comes fucking around begging for food. And like the moms are like, no. You're like, yeah, no, it's fine. It's deliciously evil. I love it. But that's not how the book ended. And they actually filmed an alternate ending to the movie where it's unclear whether it's implied that Clarice let him go rather than him cutting off part of his hand to get out of handcuffs to escape. So they hedged their bets with that, but in the end they went with Clarice siding with law and order and deciding that she was going to try to keep him captive even though she was super drugged up and had been shot, and handcuffs him to herself. And she's I think, and this is exactly how it was in the book too, her ponytail is latched into an old fashioned refrigerator door and she can't get her fucking hair out. Hey man, I mean, I know personally, if I have a cleaver and I'm in that situation, there's no way I'm going to cut through her pretty red hair. I'm going to just
Julianne
cleave
Moore.
off I'm just going to cleave off a chunk of my hand instead of cutting through her ponytail and dragging her with me. Whatever. It was a stupid ending. And yeah, Julianne Moore as Clarice. I have nothing against Julianne Moore. I just don't think she was good. Her fake Southern accent, her fake West Virginia accent, was what it's supposed to be, just fades in and out. It comes and goes whenever it pleases. There's just something wrong about her. Like, she's not. The material isn't nearly as good as Lamb's. No. So,
well,
there's nothing for her
she
really
plays
to
a
work
total
with.
badass, like just tough badass chick. In the beginning of the movie, I think she's running a sting op on like some drug dealers and gets in a shootout or something. And she's
that's
like
in the
running,
book too.
She's running it, and it's so different from like the vulnerable. That's the thing. Jodie Foster plays it like real vulnerable. And, like she's just a fish out of water, but she gets by. And then Julianne, it's like a totally different character. Like it doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly it. And the reason it doesn't, I mean, sure, this is almost a decade later or a full decade later. The Clarice will have changed after being in the FBI for 10 years, right? But the fact that the audience had to also accept a new actress on top of an entirely transformed character after 10 years made it seem like a completely different character. If you had Jodie Foster reprise the role, at least there would have been that, we believe immediately that this is Clarice Starling because
continuity.
This is Clarice Starling. Yeah, this is her. We know this face. This is Clarice, a bit older, and you would have bought that part of it. But also, I'm really glad Jodie Foster didn't do it because it might have cheapened the original. The original, Silence of the Lambs. And it's watchable, but it's so Ridley Scotty too at times. Like, he's so into big sets.
That was Ridley Scott. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, he restrained himself, but, and the setting of this movie allowed him to do that too, to be all into his big sets and his big scenes, and because it takes place in Italy, a lot of it, and on the palatial Verger estate, and these big grandiose locations, whereas the original one was like in Baltimore and at Quantico and in an insane asylum and in Buffalo Bill's basement with his skin suit and, you know, dancing to Goodbye Horses, which there's no menace in Hannibal in the movie. You know, even with the incredible makeup for Mason Verger,
is that Gary Oldman's character?
Yeah, that's Gary Oldman. He did a great job. He did an incredible job. And it doesn't, like, that's it. There's no menace. There's no shadows. Like, this movie is so brightly lit. It's so glossy. You know, there's no moodiness to it at all. And it doesn't feel anything like Silence of the Lambs. It doesn't feel, and Hannibal is so different. Like, and it's all because of what the story is. You know, for two books and for 2 movies at this point, if you saw Manhunter, Hannibal Lecter is this serial killer with a backstory that's shrouded in mystery, that's hinted at, which makes it really dark and cool and scary. And he's in a prison cell talking to an FBI agent. He's this mysterious serial killer sage almost, right? But then now he's out in the world, and all of a sudden he's this old man because Anthony Hopkins got old. You know, that 10 years made a big difference for him because it was the difference between being in his 50s and being in his 60s. And he looks it, man. I mean, he looks fucking old in Hannibal, and it's man, I just watched it not too long ago, and there's that scene when he comes back to America and he gets kidnapped. He finally gets captured by Mason Verger's guys. They tase him and shit and throw him in a van. And I guess he's trying to blend in with the crowd, but I mean, he's walking around in, you know, like khakis with a denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up with the cuffs buttoned and like this old man dad hat. And it's just, I don't know, man. No menace.
It takes you out of it.
It does. It really takes you out of it. And the story's all over the place, too.
You mentioned
that's
menace.
The story.
You mentioned menace from Hannibal Lecter, and like one thing that comes to mind, like to me, it's still to this day, it's like one of the creepiest frames I've ever seen, and it's in Silence of the Lambs when he's about to escape from the makeshift cell in Memphis, and he beats the one cop to death, and he's about to go after and he's standing there listening to like the classical music on the tape player, and like they shoot it down from above, and he's standing there.
I know the shot.
In his white T-shirt and his white pants with the blood smeared on his mouth, and he's looking up, and he looks like a ghoul because his mouth's covered in blood, and his skin is so pale, almost like to match his white shirt. He doesn't look human. He looks like a vampire, and you're like, oh God, it's just like unnerving. And you really feel like just how evil he can be. And then like you don't really get it after that. You don't get that from him in the other movies. He says creepy things, and he tries to, make people uncomfortable. But that was as scary as he ever got, was like that shot. Oh God, it's so unnerving.
Yeah, dude. Now, and that's a great example because that scene is so brightly lit, but it's also dark. Right? It's starkly lit. It's lit from above from these, huge bright lights, but it's only directly down on his cell. So everything around him is bathed in darkness and shadows, and that one direction light creates really dark shadows in the cell. And it's just perfect. You see everything, but it's ominous as fuck. And that's the scariest part, terrifying. Too, is he bites a chunk of the one guard's face off and maces the shit out of him, right? And then you get that great POV shot of him beating the other guard to death while he's handcuffed to the bar. And from the guard's point of view of Hannibal it's like he's hitting the camera with the billy club over and over, which is the first time we get to see him be violent at all. This whole thing is the first time he's lashed out in violence in the film, and it's like a slow burn, you know, and then he gets distracted. He gets distracted by the music that was already playing on his tape player and gets lost in the melody, and then remembers where he is and looks around and finds the guard's pocket knife and goes after the other guard to go cut his face off and use it as a mask to escape.
As one does.
God damn, dude. Like, that's hard to beat. That's really fucking hard to beat. And I'll give Harris credit for this. The basics of that were in the book. The mechanism of that escape and all that was in the book. He did that.
And it's simple.
But, man, it just... And the thing with the elevator and them just the fact that he's the guy on the gurney when the blood starts dripping onto the sheet and they wheel him out and they think he's on the roof of the elevator.
He's right under their noses.
Yeah, it's simple, but it's like, whoa, your mind is blown. You're fucking done at that point. And that's that quick cut to Clarice's friend at the academy finding out about it, running to get her, and then Clarice is like fresh out of the shower with wet hair and a robe, and they I think cutting to that and her being in such a vulnerable state.
Yeah, but she's also not worried about it though. She says I don't know, man. He won't come after me.
I know.
He
would
consider it rude.
It's a great line, and it's ultimately true, but I always kind of felt like that scene she was also trying to convince herself as much as her friend, because I think the nervous pacing along with it, I think it's just her telling herself that no, he wouldn't come after me. He wouldn't come after me. He's got to get the fuck away. He's got to make tracks. You know, that would be rude. He wouldn't waste the time. But it's a great scene because that's what makes it a great movie. You can talk about even benign scenes, transitional scenes, all these years later and interpret them different ways. Hannibal is just a very cookie cutter, on the surface movie. Like there's not much to it at all. Mason Verger's kind of an interesting character, I guess, but not really. So,
help me out here. That's Gary Oldman's guy with like the crazy torn off face. And so I have this right, Hannibal Lecter convinced him to cut his own face off, and that's why he bears a grudge against him and wants to feed him to pigs.
The lore on and a lot of this did not make it into the movie, so it's very confusing. But the lore of Mason Verger is that he, once upon a time, when Hannibal Lecter was still a practicing psychiatrist and doing his serial killer shit, he was the heir to a large, what the fuck would you call it? They owned pork slaughterhouses. Pork mogul. His dad was a pork mogul, man. He was a pork baron.
He's in Big Pig.
Big Pig, man. Big Pig. So, yeah, he inherits this giant, fortune and estate. And in the book, he has a sister. It's more complicated. But he's also a sick child molester.
Oh.
And he hunts kids at this big day camp thing that his father established as a charity thing, where they would send wayward youth off to this summer camp, and he would go diddle kids at the summer camp. And he got caught, and as rich people do, he got out of it with a court-appointed shrink as part of the conditions of his probation or whatever. And that court-appointed shrink happened to be Hannibal Lecter. And of course, Hannibal discovers who he is, and I would assume he would think that fucking children is rude. He has a weird sense of justice, Hannibal Lecter. And I mean, they get into that way more in the show, but we'll get to that at the end here. But he leads Mason Verger on because he's also into like BDSM and just all kinds of kinky shit. He's just a pervert, just a general pervert, man. And nothing against perverts. I love perverts, but you know, the kitty fucking makes you know he's a bad pervert.
Yeah, you can't do that.
And yeah, so Hannibal kind of like makes him almost think that there's a chance for like some lover stuff between them. Goes over to his place one night, and they're like doing some autoerotic asphyxiation shit, and Hannibal doses him with a crazy cocktail of hallucinogens and what's the truth serum, the classic truth serum drug?
Oh, sodium pentothal.
Pentothal, yeah. Like it's like a derivative of that. It's something that makes you very suggestible from outside sources when you're on it. And he gives him this crazy cocktail, and then when he's wasted on that and all fucked up, he convinces him to cut pieces of his own face off and feed it to his dogs.
Oh.
And then Hannibal breaks his neck.
And that's why he's in a wheelchair.
And yeah, that's why he's mostly paralyzed, and his face looks like it was sewn together from, I don't know, a piece of fucking leather for a baseball mitt. And that's why his eyes all fucked up. So yeah, that's how Mason Verger came to be.
Gross.
I don't know. Yeah, I think he was like in a coma for a long time, and like by the time he came out of it, Hannibal had been caught. I think. I'm a little fuzzy on the chronology. Either that or right after Mason Verger didn't report Hannibal for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't remember. They get into it really good in the show. But I don't remember.
How'd your face come off, Mason? Oh, I fell.
Yeah, no. In the show, there's actually a legit explanation for that. Well, the show incorporates. It's allowed to incorporate everything in Red Dragon, Hannibal, and they wanted to, Hannibal Rising, the last book. They couldn't touch any of the material in Silence of the Lambs. So they kind of rearranged all those elements of that story as one long narrative. So bits and pieces get mixed up. And the whole thing with the pigs from Hannibal, you know, the wild pigs that they trained to eat human flesh and respond to screams. And that Mason's Verger big revenge plot is to kidnap Hannibal Lecter and then feed him slowly to these basically wild boars.
Murder pigs.
Murder pigs that they've trained to go nuts at the sound of human screams and to attack human-shaped dolls and shit. It goes into it a lot in the book, like a lot. Instead, in the series, all the stuff with those pigs is moved up to before Mason Verger cuts his face off, when he's still a person. And his explanation for how he gets fucked up is that he fell into his pig pen and the pig started to eat his face.
Some of that's real.
The handlers, and broke his neck. You know, he fell, broke his neck, couldn't move. Pigs started to eat his face. And yeah, pigs will fucking eat dead bodies. Absolutely. If you throw them into them. Pigs will eat anything. Anything almost. You ever see Deadwood? Did you ever watch Deadwood? HBO?
No, I never watched Deadwood.
That's a big thing in that whole show. That's how they get rid of bodies. They throw them. There's like a small Chinatown section, and there's a lot of pig pens, and they just throw bodies to the pigs.
They do it in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Is it? No, it's not. It's Snatch. It's in Snatch.
Yeah,
if they
I was
do
just
it.
gonna say it's that guy with the gray hair from Snatch, the old gangster who says "fuck" every other word.
Yeah. I forget
yeah,
it.
he
They
talks
all have
about it,
crazy
yeah.
names.
That fucking
Jack Crawford's
movie,
in that
Jesus
movie
Christ.
too. He's Dennis Farina.
Dennis Farina, yeah, the original Jack Crawford. Yeah, Jack
Yeah.
Crawford is played by 3 people in the movies: Dennis Farina, Harvey Keitel, and Scott Glenn. And then he's played by Lawrence Fishburne in the show.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he has you have to see the show.
I do have to
TJ
watch
has
that.
not seen the show. I've seen it. I shouldn't say how many times I've seen it because that probably gets you put on a list. But I'll tell you, man, that is a fucked up show. Every time I watch it, I get to some point and I'm like, I cannot fucking believe this was on television. Like, I just absolutely can't believe that. It's usually the episode where a person is sewed into the dead body of a horse.
Oh boy.
That I go, God damn. I don't know how it got on TV, but it's an amazing 3 seasons of television. As you can tell, this one is running a little long, so we're going to break it into 2 parts. Check out Yipee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon for Hannibal Lecter Movies Part 2 next week.